Hey everyone, I'm online campus pastor Robert Murphy, and we're here in the Access venue at the Old Mill campus. And today we're grateful to be joined by Joshua Becker. As some of you may know, Joshua spent his high school years here at Christ Community Church, graduated from Omaha Burke, and then became an intern with our student ministry, and then went on to be a student pastor up in Vermont, I believe.
Wisconsin, and then Vermont.
Wisconsin, Vermont. And then you're currently an associate pastor down with our friend Joe Derrigo down in the Phoenix area at Journey Church.
Absolutely. When I interned here for 2 years, I worked with Joe very closely. So when he had called and was looking for some help, I jumped right in.
Right on. But something you're kind of getting more known for, kind of outside church circles, is minimalism. Some people call it sometimes simplicity. I'm sure there's other terms for it. But I know you shared here 2 years ago, you shared your story, and it really, I know God used it to kind of challenge me and kind of reevaluate my life and just like how it could be more effective and efficient, not just with spending, but just life in general. So I was wondering, maybe you could just kind of, I know the story could be a long one, but maybe just kind of share some of the finer points or just a summary of just how that day, I believe it was in May 2008, I think I saw on your one of your sites, just what happened that day.
Yeah, the backstory goes that I feel like most of my life I've had a couple avenues of discontent. Always a little discontented in the use of my finances. Yeah. Always a little discontented in what Jesus Christ plainly taught about money and possessions and how my checkbook was aligning with it, and just always a little dissettling there as to what I saw I was doing. The story goes is we were spring cleaning in Vermont, and of course the garage is muddy and dirty from all the snow. You guys know in Omaha. And so I was cleaning out the garage, and I had pulled everything out because I was going to do a good cleaning and reorganize it when I put everything back in the spring. My 4-year-old son at the time was in the backyard playing on the swing set, asking me to play with him. Meanwhile, I was working on the garage. Yeah. Started talking to my neighbor, who just made the simple comment of, maybe you don't need to own this much stuff. and it was just this moment of looking at this pile of dusty stuff in my garage and my son alone in the backyard. And I thought, man, what am I doing? How much of my life am I wasting? How much of my time and money and energy am I wasting, not just taking care of possessions, but seeking them out and buying them and removing them? And so it was a light bulb moment of, I don't need to live with this much stuff. And so we got rid of as much as we possibly could.
So when you kind of came to that conclusion, it's one thing, and I've had this too with my family, it's one thing to kind of make that decision for yourself, but obviously you come in and talk to your wife, Kim, about what you're thinking and what you would like to, this path you want to go down as a family. What was kind of the response of just her and also your kids, just as you chose that at the time and as you continued to pursue that lifestyle?
Yeah, sure. Great question. My wife had been spring cleaning the inside of the house, luckily. So I remember walking in. She was in the bathroom, like scrubbing the bathtub. Yeah. And I said, hey, you won't believe this conversation I just had with Joan. She said we don't need to own this much stuff. And she's like, yeah, why don't you look into that just after cleaning all day? So that was it. She was in and I was in. And I think getting rid of, I always like to say, if I was in 80% of the way, she was in 60% of the way. And so getting rid of, 60% of our stuff was easy. And then we got to this point and I wanted to keep going. And she started pushing back on, wait a minute, don't we want to keep the kids' artwork when they're, So that's kind of when it was never too much strife, but just okay, we're going to have to compromise here and figure out what we really need and what we can remove.
Now, I know as a parent, for myself, I think there's always pressure, and parents always mean well. They want to get their kids everything. I know I have that as a dad, and I know sometimes it's my wife Jan and I have pursued this, trying to just rein in the spending, especially around the holidays with our kids. Do you sometimes feel that pressure or that tension of just, you see what other kids may have, and I don't begrudge parents. I'm trying not to judge what they do and where they are with their finances. But do you feel that tension sometimes of you're not maybe getting some of the latest and greatest things for your kids while every other kid has that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the part of living in the world that we're living in, and what the world values, and you see everyone else valuing this, and you can't help but wonder, okay, maybe that is worth it. You know, maybe that is okay for him to have. I just wrote my parents turned 60 this weekend. Well, my mom does, and my dad in a couple months. And so I was just writing out some of the things that I learned from them. I wrote 60 life lessons that I learned from my parents. And interestingly enough, I didn't have any that talked about like things that they gave me. You know, I don't remember the Nintendo, you know, like those gifts I don't recall. Instead, I remember things like them, you know, spending time with us when they got home from work, and them being involved in church and at our sports games. And, you know, those are the kind of things, those are the real gifts, I think, that have always lasted in my heart, you know, not what they gave me that was wrapped in paper. So I, you know, just try to keep that in mind of, you know, what they really need and what's really most important.
Well, speaking of like this post you wrote, so when you started this kind of journey, you informally started a blog called Becoming Minimalist, and you just started tracking, you know, your own story, your family's story, and pursuing this, and then all of a sudden you kind of gathered this following. And what was that experience like? Just kind of writing out your own kind of experiences and journey, and then just seeing other people connect with your story as they shared their story.
It was like finding a really great restaurant and telling other people about it, and them coming back and saying, yeah, that was really good. And we just found so much joy in this life of living with less. We found more meaning and purpose, and more opportunity to pursue things that are really important to us, and things that are really important to Christ. I began to see everything that Jesus said about money and possessions differently, that it wasn't a sacrifice to live with less, but it was an invitation to a more abundant life, seeking invisible things rather than temporal, visible things. And so as I discovered that, and as I was writing more and more about it, and more people started finding it and resonating with the story and saying, you're right, we just went through our closet, we feel so much better, we got rid of this stuff, and we feel so much better. It was, yeah, this is a story that needs to be told. You know, Jesus said it 2,000 years ago, you invite us to a better way to live, but I think we've just excused it away for so long, and thought, no, Jesus didn't really mean to sell your possessions and give to the poor, but he did, and he offered something better because of it.
And I know on your blog you share some different stories, but you talk about how Jesus invites us to this, and how really there's a more abundant life. What's been one example where you've seen that kind of played out in your own life or your family's life, where just kind of having less has allowed you to kind of have life more abundant?
You can edit out that pause. I want to tell the story about how I moved to Arizona, but I don't think I will, because I don't know how to phrase it without.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Some people from Vermont might stumble upon it.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest one for me. One of the ways that I've seen this happen is in living with less, and in intentionally living with less. I've found much greater freedom in the use of my time, in the use of what I want to pursue with my life. So I've discovered that as I purposefully live with less, I don't need as much money. I don't have to make as much money, and I can spend my time on other things that are more important. This whole idea of inviting people to live with less has become, a passion of mine, and I've discovered that living with less is allowing me more opportunity to even invite others to do that and experience Christ's invitation in that way.
No, that's awesome. You obviously been referencing Jesus a lot, obviously, major influence in your life. And the holiday season kind of upon us, it's always interesting to me just how much people kind of rail against, oh my goodness, I see Christmas stuff in August. but yet people are still buying it. You know, I think I saw the stat, it was $8 billion was spent on Halloween this year. I mean, just with the holiday season, what are some thoughts that kind of go through your mind? I mean, maybe it's the pressure of having to have, you know, a great, you know, buy all these things for the holidays for your family, for others, or do you find yourself more like just, I really want to advocate this lifestyle and how it coincides with, you know, the teachings of Jesus, because I want people to be free and not to be kind of debt laden during the holiday season.
You know, I think people naturally want to have the perfect Christmas. You know, they want things to go just right. And as they want that to be true of themselves and be true of their family, they start to focus on all the wrong things to make it perfect. You know, just the right decorations. They need to have the right lights up. They need to give the right gifts to their kids so that they're happy. The meal has to be just perfect. You know, they get caught up in all these things thinking that that is going to create the perfect Christmas and the perfect holiday season. But meanwhile, they get so chasing this idea of the perfect Christmas that they forget what Christmas was all about in the first place. And the perfect Christmas is one where we remind ourselves of the gift of Jesus, you know, and the sacrifice that he made to become a human being. And it doesn't take, you know, $750 per person on gifts to focus on Jesus. In fact, many of those things start to distract us from the very thing that makes the holiday season perfect and great in the first place. So, you know, the challenge is just how do I center on that while everyone else in the world is trying to create a perfect Christmas by buying things at the department store?
Well, you've been obviously talking a lot about Jesus, and obviously with the holidays here. How would you know? Sometimes people ask, well, what's Jesus say about this? And you've kind of alluded to that about to sell your possessions to give to the poor. Obviously, it may be different from, you know, depending on the person, just where they're at, what their struggles may be, what, you know, how, if materialism is an idol in their life, so to speak. What would you say are like pretty clear, you know, teachings of Jesus on just when it comes to not just possessions, but maybe just wealth and financial stewardship?
Sure. As I consider the life of Christ, other biblical examples, people often ask me, so are you for poverty? You know, are you against making money? Yeah. And I always say I'm not against making money. I'm not even against pursuing wealth with your gifts in a reasonable way. What I am against, what I think Christ was against, is the incorrect use of wealth. Right. And with the wealth, and let's face it, if we live in America, we're wealthy compared to the world. You know, that's the other thing, is that none of us are wealthy compared to, you know, so-and-so. But in reality, we all are. And the problem is that the more we accumulate the wealth, you know, the easier it is to misuse it and not, you know, use it for the correct thing. So John the Baptist, when he was preparing the people for Jesus Christ to come, he says, hey, if any of you have 2 tunics, give one to the guy who doesn't have any. And we, of course, never apply that verse to anything. You know, if we had tunics, maybe we would, but, you know, none of us are giving away our extra coats. But this was his way of preparing their hearts for what Jesus was going to do and what Jesus is going to offer. And I've found in my life and in other people's lives, as we purposefully get rid of the physical possessions in our lives that are distracting us, as we get rid of those things, we open up our hearts to receive new things. Even if it's the simple thought of, man, why is it so hard for me to get rid of my 3 winter coats, even when I have one here? Why is that hard for me to part with? I think it causes us to journey inward a little bit and figure out what's going on in our heart and why we need Jesus and why we need the kingdom today. And so you know, those are just some of the different teachings of Christ that kind of shape my new view of the world.
What would you say to someone they're hearing this, or maybe they've read your books, they see your blog posts, and they say, well, I could never do what you do. What would you say would be like some good first steps for people who are like, hey, maybe you can't just jump into the level I'm at, but here's some things you can do to kind of just, start on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Because most people hear the story and they naturally jump to the most difficult thing in their life that they could ever get rid of. Well, what about my, collection of so and so from my grandparents that they get? They always jump to the hardest things. And I would say, don't go to the hardest things. Just get rid of the easy things that we all have closets full of stuff that we don't need and we don't use, and we don't think that it's causing a problem, but in reality, it really is, cluttering our minds and cluttering our homes, and removing those things, you begin to feel this new sense of freedom and this new sense of opportunity in life. And so I would send them that way. For as the Christmas season comes up, I would say, challenge yourself on what you're giving as gifts. You don't have to give up giving gifts, or you don't have to give up receiving gifts, but put a little more thought into it. And rather than, 5 gifts to your kids, focus on one that they really need, or one nice gift, as opposed to, a whole bunch of presents, just one really lasting thing, as opposed to something that they're going to get rid of in 3 or 4 months anyway.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, final thought, what would be the one thing, if you could just, you got people watching this online, and when you're sharing with people, what's the one thing you want to impart, that you want people to kind of be leaving with when they hear you share this message?
What I love people to realize is that when Christ called us to sell our possessions, give to the poor, when he told us not to stockpile possessions here on earth, that for so much of my life, I thought this was a test of my faith, a sacrifice today for something better in the future. And I've come to realize that his teaching on possessions was just like everything else that he laid out. It was just a better way to live. It's better not to live in adultery, and it's better to be faithful to your spouse and not to lie and to not be greedy. It's just a more enjoyable way to get the most out of life. And his teachings on possessions were exactly the same. And it's a complete change in what the world tells us and in how I viewed what he invited us to. So I'd leave people with just a new twist on what he meant when he said those things.
Oh, that's great. Well, hey, Joshua, thanks for taking some time just to share with us. And if people want more information, they can go to your blog, becomingminimalist.com.
Yeah.
Your books are available on Amazon. We were saying before, bestseller #1 in the category.
There you go.
It's good, but it's cool to see it. It's not just to me, what I like about it, it's not just about selling everything and living with less, but I see a real intentionality and a real purpose. And that for me is what drew me to this. Just hearing your story, I think draws a lot of people's. It's not for doing it for the sake of doing it. Like, there's a real motivation or purpose behind it. And it's cool to hear your story and just kind of impact others, see how God's using that to help others just advance the kingdom.
Sure.
So thanks for taking time to share with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity to share it a little more.
Hey, thanks everyone for watching, and talk to you soon.